Hello everyone, my name is Faye. I'm 23 and a proud Cork woman. Family is very important to me, and I was blessed to grow up with loving parents and extended family. Growing up, my mum was a practicing Catholic. My dad was kind, patient and caring, but a workaholic and, like his own father, a non-practicing Catholic. Religion was among his favourite subjects to discuss though, so as a child I learned a lot about other religions, but very little about my own. For our family, Sunday was the family day. It was often the only day of the week that we saw my dad, so we'd usually go on family trips together. This also meant that my mum, my sister and I went to Saturday Vigil Mass. Mum didn't drive, so we had to walk 30 minutes across town each Saturday evening just to get to the church. I always believed in God, but I had a very childish faith. For example, my mum used to call the church God's house. And we all knew that God was, up there. But in my childish understanding, I literally thought that God lived in the ceiling of the church. On the ceiling were some lights that I thought looked like doorknobs, so obviously I assumed that this is God's door. And I would stare up at the ceiling during Mass, hoping to get a glimpse of him. I wondered what he would look like, and I imagined him to wear a long trench coat. Even when I talked to God at home, I imagined that somehow he could hear me from the ceiling of the church. In this childish faith, I had no personal relationship with God, nor did I have a desire for one, because I didn't even know it was possible. Rather, God was just there, like oxygen, and you could talk to Holy Mary or Jesus if you had a problem. Despite the wonderful family that surrounded me, I also carried around a deep hurt from very early in my childhood. These painful experiences shaped the way I viewed the world, which often seemed scary, sad, lonely, and unwelcoming. It seemed so set on trivial and frivolous things, but I was quite serious, hurt, and lacking direction. So I turned to God and the church for refuge and consolation. These experiences had an effect on the way I viewed myself and my femininity. This showed itself primarily in my distaste for girly things like dolls, dresses, or girly colours. I developed a skewed understanding of my body and didn't see the beauty and dignity of my sexuality. Instead, I almost felt repulsed by it, even to the point where I was extremely uncomfortable with the fact that my parents slept in the same bed. All this affected the way I dressed, spoke, and acted, and how I interacted with others. I also found relationships with my peers quite difficult. I spent a great deal of time either in my head or reading books, because I couldn't relate well to other children. Although I did have a few friends, these friendships were compartmentalised. The school friends I had were not invited to stay over at my house, nor did I look to stay at theirs. My capacity and willingness for social interaction was very limited. I was just so hurt that I didn't really know how to let anyone fully into my life. I was blessed to have some good Catholic teachers in primary school. They prayed with us every day and also did some little talks to help us learn about our faith. I'm very grateful for all these women who helped form me in the faith. One thing that really stands out during this time is that I learnt more about Our Lady, especially her title, Blessed Mary, Ever Virgin. She seemed so pure and clean and feminine, and this was in complete contrast to all I was struggling with, so I went to her for comfort. As I came to the end of primary school, my granddad invited me to knock with him for the Rosary Rally. I didn't even know how to pray the Rosary. I went along so I could spend time with my granddad and ended up having great crack with my distant cousins on the 5-hour bus journey. It was a Rosary Rally though, so this meant that we prayed 5 rosaries up and 5 rosaries down. And I don't mean 5 decades, I mean 5 full rosaries. Being a child, I was completely overwhelmed, but at least one good thing came from it. After that day, I certainly knew how to pray the rosary. When I started secondary school, I decided that I no longer wanted to have to walk to Mass, as it was usually a 30-minute walk and often raining. So instead I asked my nan to take me to Mass with her in her car. I thought I was so smart. I'd get a lift to Mass and spend time at nan, And I'd get home just in time for the Saturday night big movie on RTE. So you can imagine my surprise when we arrived at the church and I realised we were an hour early. But this was not a mistake. This is what Nan did every week. She started at the back of the church and visited the shrine of St. Anthony, and then headed into the Adoration Chapel, where she proceeded to sit in silence for the hour before Mass. I didn't even know what Eucharistic adoration was or what to do, but as I went with Nan each week, I watched her and learned from her. In the Adoration Chapel, there was a small wooden altar with the Eucharist in a golden stand. I knew this large white host, the Eucharist, was Jesus. At the beginning, I wasn't really adoring God. Instead, I noticed the man sleeping in the chair beside me and Nan praying her 7-minute rosary. During this time, I'd think about my week, read the books on the shelf, and occasionally look up at the host. Before long, though, I began to look forward to the peace and stability I felt in the chapel. I continued going with Nan every week and soon came to look forward to it. So much so that I often abandoned other Saturday events just to make sure I was in time for adoration. In second year of secondary school, I started praying to St. Joseph for my dad. I prayed that Dad would come to know God in whatever way he could. My prayer was answered when soon after my dad began attending the local Church of Ireland services and became an Anglican. This is a massive change for our family. I continue to go to Mass with my Nan on Saturdays, but now my whole family, Mum, Dad, sister and I, were attending church together on Sunday. Sunday wasn't just a family day anymore. We actually went to church together. I began to see that there were differences between our two churches, though, and now I can see how God used this to help me learn more about my Catholic faith. Throughout secondary school, I continued to struggle with my femininity and sexuality and didn't really want to be noticed by boys. This I demonstrated by how I dressed and by never going to the teenage discos like the other girls in my class. I also continued to be quite distant in my friendships, though by now I did have a few close friends. A lot of things changed for me in transition year. I would sometimes pray the rosary on my own before school, and up until this point, my whole life was directed towards studying. But I began to see that there was more to life than just getting good grades. During this year, I travelled abroad for the first time without my parents. I went on school trips to China and France and saw more of the world. But the journey that had the biggest impact on me was the one when my granddad took me on pilgrimage to Fatima. I learned all about Our Lady's apparitions, and in some way the faith became more real for me there. As much as I loved this trip, I was the youngest by about 50 years. On this pilgrimage, I heard about the Youth 2000 prayer meeting in my parish, which I ended up attending. The Youth 2000 group was completely different to my previous faith experiences. It was great to meet young people my age who also took the faith seriously. We prayed the rosary together, read the gospel together, and then Father Ger and Father Eamon, the priests in our parish, would explain the gospel, catechize us, and we could even ask them questions. The best part, though, was the cup of tea and the chats at the end of the evening. I was finally receiving formation and catechesis for the first time since my confirmation, and had Catholic friends almost my age. As we learned more about the faith, I found that my views on femininity and sexuality were challenged. They were being presented as something good. I found this very hard to grasp, and so I did not change anything at this time. Still, these ideas buried themselves in the back of my mind and remained there until college. At college, I studied science, and my department was very male-dominated. Both my primary and secondary schools were all girls, so the differences between men and women became much more apparent to me, in how they dressed and how they acted. It was at this point that I was more willing to embrace the fact that I was a woman, but I was still uncomfortable with trying to dress or act in a more feminine way, as I still didn't really want to be noticed. Throughout college, my faith deepened. I continued to go to adoration and Mass with my Nan on Saturdays. In the first year, during the abortion referendum, I started praying the rosary every day. In second year, I started helping music at Masses in the city and attending Theology on Tap. This is a group of young Catholics who invited different Catholic speakers to come and teach us about the faith. It was great to be around young Catholics again and to be able to ask questions and to have people who could answer them. The witness of the young Catholic women I became friends with was a massive help for me. I could now see their beauty as women and that it was a good thing. And I was in an environment which made it easier for me to embrace my femininity. I also came across some of the teachings in theology of the body. This helped me understand that sexuality was good, that God created it good, and that we should learn to use it as He intended. It also helped me see where I had misunderstandings in relation to my femininity. I began to embrace this more and to appreciate the gift of my womanhood. All of this healing and these realizations were very gradual, but I believe our Blessed Mother supplied all these graces to me. In third year, I attended a retreat with some Benedictine nuns. I met women who knew the goodness of their womanhood and had given everything up to draw closer to God. I came across the Liturgy of the Hours for the first time and learned about fasting, and I put all these into practice right away. What I loved most about this retreat was the sisterhood I experienced. I realised this was something I desired more of. So for Lent 2020, I joined the Daughters of Zion, a group of young women who commit to support each other to pray and fast throughout Lent with the purpose of growing closer to Jesus. It was the first time I took Lent seriously, and it vitalised my spiritual life. Through this, I understood the importance of prayer, fellowship, scripture, and what it was to be a woman of faith. I really felt my faith growing, and especially my relationship with our Blessed Mother. Then lockdown happened. I really missed the sacraments and felt isolated. I started watching a lot of faith-based YouTube videos for spiritual nourishment. During this time, I had a lot of time for reflection, and I realised that I hadn't really dealt with my past hurts. I heard someone share their story on the radio, and their experience was similar to mine. I knew that I needed to get some help. So immediately after the radio show, I contacted a counsellor and booked an appointment. The counselling I received helped me to fully acknowledge my past hurts and how it had impacted me. I no longer felt weighed down by the secret that I'd carried for so long. I was then able to allow God to bring me healing. I became more comfortable in myself and found that I began to appreciate my femininity even more and actually wanted to wear dresses and to look well. Not long after this, I gathered a group of other young women together to do Nineveh 90. This was a 90-day program which we used to prepare for Christmas. This included a consecration to Our Lady. Even though I had a devotion to her, I had avoided Marian consecration for a long time because I had a misunderstanding of Our Lady's role. I had been influenced by the notion that we shouldn't be going to Mary when we could go straight to Jesus, as if somehow she was taking away from God. One thing that really helped me overcome this obstacle was reading a book by Tim Staples called Behold Your Mother. He helped me understand that devotion to Mary didn't take away from God, but brought me closer to Him. I took this consecration to Our Lady very seriously and tried to give myself completely to Jesus through Mary. From this time, I really began to trust Our Lady, and when I prayed to her, I now prayed with expectation. I really felt like she was close to me and was looking after me. As the lockdowns continued, we couldn't go to Mass and many churches were closed, which I found very frustrating. I decided to gather a few people from my parish to pray the rosary outside the church every Sunday. It was important to me to keep Sunday holy and in some way to have a form of community with other Catholics. This sustained me through this difficult time of separation. After this, I started thinking about my future and my vocation. Was I called to religious life, single life, or marriage? I didn't know. What I did know was that I was no longer afraid of marriage, and I was no longer running from the possibility of intimacy. It's only looking back I can see how Our Lady has been gently working in the background, bringing healing to me in these areas. As I was discerning, my granddad mentioned Holy Family Mission to me, and I had the chance to visit in the summer. I knew I needed to get to know God better. He had always been in the background, but I wanted to put Him first in my life. Holy Family was the best way I knew how to do that. Since coming here, I have learned so much more about myself, how to better grow as a woman of faith. I learned how to have healthy relationships, particularly with other women, which were open. I learned how to live in community, how to be okay with not always doing things the way I'd prefer. Even in the preparation for this testimony, it took me a long time to see how much our Blessed Mother had helped me. She was so humble and so veiled, but now I can see that she was guiding me back to Christ all the while. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your prayers and support. We too at Holy Family will continue to keep you in our prayers. God bless.